Matthew, so it seemed there was at least a bit of optimism with that period of the ceasefire earlier this year, but it all appears to just be degenerating terribly again. What's the latest?
Yes, Joe, good evening to you. It started to degenerate, as you've said there, back a fortnight ago when Israel resumed its bombardment of Gaza. And now we've seen this announcement from the Israeli Defence Minister, Israel Katz, of this significant military operation that is now being planned and will begin, particularly in and around southern parts of Gaza. Israel Katz, the Defence Minister, has issued a statement this morning, local time, saying that the Israeli military is going to start taking large areas of land in Gaza and adding it to what it's described as Israel's security zone. There are very limited details as to exactly how much land is going to be seized, what sort of operation is going to be used to undertake that plan, but he is certainly making it clear that Israel sees this as the only way to convince Hamas to release Israeli hostages. There are 59 still held in Gaza, more than 30 of them believed to be dead, but Israel is believing that this is the only way to ensure that those hostages can be released, to add that military pressure to Hamas, and saying that it's really up to the Palestinian population in Gaza also to rise up against Hamas and to push it out of power, to force it to lay down its arms, something that the group's leaders have said is a red line in this conflict, Joe.
And was this expected?
We've started to see some hints that something was happening, particularly in southern Gaza, over the last week or so. There was that large-scale military operation around Tel el-Sultan near Rafah in southern Gaza last weekend. That's the incident which has garnered a lot of attention in the last few days after the discovery of the bodies of 15 Palestinian medics and emergency responders in graves, a mass grave, as the United Nations is calling it, after days of not being able to get into that site to retrieve those bodies. We have also seen in the last day or so large-scale evacuation warnings being issued by the Israel Defence Forces around Rafah. Yesterday, local time, the evacuation warning that was issued was the largest we have seen since the resumption of fighting in Gaza, since Israel resumed its bombardment a fortnight ago. There are tens of thousands of people who were told to evacuate from Gaza's southern reaches. I've seen some estimates suggesting up to 140,000 people told to get out of Rafah and move to the humanitarian zone, as it's being described in Al-Mawasi there. We have also seen a build-up of Israeli military in Gaza and outside of Gaza. For the period of the ceasefire, there was a buffer zone, as it was being called, along the border between Gaza and Israel. This was an area that Israeli troops had withdrawn to but were maintaining a presence. That buffer zone has very quickly expanded bit by bit since the resumption of that bombardment a fortnight ago. And we know that Israeli forces have also started to move in terms of ground operations in northern Gaza, in the Netzarim corridor, which is a patch of land that stretches from the Israel border to the Mediterranean, about a third of the way up Gaza, if we think of it as one long strip there. There has been a lot of military build-up, both in terms of troops and tanks and the like, in the last few weeks, and that's given us a sense that something may have been brewing.
And this is happening in the context of no aid having got into the strip for quite some time, and these people having been moved around repeatedly over the past couple of years amid the ongoing bombardment.
That's right. So no aid for a number of weeks now. That was a decision announced by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a few weeks ago, saying that as far as Israel was concerned, there was sufficient aid in the strip during the period of that ceasefire, and that Hamas needed to be pressured there. That has prompted global condemnation, not only from humanitarian organisations, but from various governments around the world, saying that that is not the right approach, that the civilian population is harmed as a result of that aid blockade. A couple of weeks later, we saw Israel announce it was going to be shutting off all electricity to the Strip. Really, very little electricity was actually getting into Gaza for the course of that war, but that decision impacted a desalination plant in southern Gaza, which was supporting a population of around 600,000 people in giving them clean drinking water, something which is very, very scarce in Gaza due to the utter devastation that we have seen there over the course of the last 16 or 17 months of war. And we saw an announcement yesterday, local time, from the World Food Programme that it was having to shut down the last of its bakeries that it's been running in Gaza because it hasn't been able to get enough supplies into, such as flour and the like, to keep those operations ongoing. So this is all compounding and adding to a serious humanitarian crisis there, but Israel is pushing ahead without much restraint, it seems.
And what influence does the US have in this?
I think, Joe, it's fair to say that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have been given a green light to do these sort of things in Gaza by the White House, by the US President Donald Trump. The resumption of fighting, the resumption of those airstrikes a fortnight ago, the White House was given advance notice. They seem to be the only ones who were told that those strikes were about to restart. And over the weekend, we've heard from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Israel is committed to what he is describing as the Trump plan for Gaza. This was that pitch that wasn't really very well fleshed out. There were very little details added to it, but this pitch that Donald Trump put out there of moving the Palestinian population out of Gaza and resettling them in other countries so that then the US, under the initial iterations, I guess, of that fairly flimsy idea, would take over Gaza, would rebuild it along with other countries. That has shifted somewhat, and Israel is saying that this is going to be a program of voluntary immigration of Palestinians. So anyone who wants to leave Gaza will be facilitated to do so. You have to think of a situation where when you've lost everything in Gaza, voluntary may well take up very different definitions there. But there has been this constant referencing by the Israeli government to support it is getting from the United States to continue its operations in Gaza. Very different language than a couple of months ago when it was Joe Biden still in the White House, even though there were constant references to US military support and the like. It is a very different tone now, Joe.
Okay, Matthew Doran there in Jerusalem.